First thing again is I'm Jack Replinger. I taught for the last 13 years at a public charter school in Memphis, and this is my website. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to put them in the chat. And I think it's easiest just whenever you have a question, put it in there, and I'll try to answer that immediately. And then also after this is over, I'll send everybody a recording. And if you have questions anytime, my email is on the homepage right here. And feel free to shoot me an email anytime. I really like hearing from people. All right, so the first thing I want to do is, if you haven't already, to create a teacher account, you'll click on this green button and you'll enter your name and email and school. But I want to go over a few things that are pretty important to get right from the start. So the first thing is this teacher code. This is what you'll give your students in order to sign up. So just make sure it's something short and that you're going to have them type in. They're going to type it in every time that they log in. All right, the next thing is you can set gravitational acceleration to 9.81, or you can use 10. Just choose your preference right there. I'll actually show you later how you can set that differently for different classes. Then the next thing is you can choose the notation that you'd like to use. So we have three options. Scalar, this uses only positive answers, and it uses speed instead of velocity and distance instead of displacement. Then vector magnitude, that uses the more traditional terminology like velocity and displacement, but everything will have an absolute value sign around it, so students will only be allowed to put in positive answers. For scalar and vector magnitude, students won't even be able to type in a negative. It just won't show up for them. If you want to use that up and right are positive, then go ahead and use vector traditional, and then that will, anything that's down or left, students will have to type in a negative sign to get that right. Then the next thing, and this is new this year, is make sure you select which class periods that you teach and what level that they are. So don't worry too much about the levels, just make sure you pick something, change these to active, otherwise your students won't be able to sign up. So again, make sure you put in a class code, select your gravitational acceleration value, select the notation you want, and activate the sections that you want. And we'll talk a lot more about the difference between the different three levels, but you can always change this later, and it's easy to customize, so just make sure you activate the ones that you want. All right, so after that, I'm going to show you how to create a student account. So you will have your students create their own accounts by clicking on this blue Students Join Here button, and then have them create a username. Make sure you don't just let them type any username they want, otherwise your stuff will be in a crazy order. We try to collect as little information about students as possible, so have them use a roster number, or I have them use last name and first initial. Then they'll enter a password, select the class period that they take you, make sure you've activated the class period first, and then type in the teacher code that you've created. So I have a dummy account with the teacher code phrase that we'll use right now. All right, so whenever a student logs in, they'll start on this dashboard. So they'll have the unit that they're on right here. So it starts with Unit 1, velocity. And there are three modes: work, extra practice, and assessment. And we'll talk about those ones in a little bit. To access a couple other things on the dashboard, there is our video lessons that I made that go with each skill right here. And on the right side, it'll say if you want to set a due date for assignments, you can set it over here. I'll show you, or students will be able to see it right here. I'll show you how to set that in a little bit. Each unit starts with an inquiry activity. So whenever possible, we use PhET. And if there's not a PhET activity, we give them some data, and they can use this data to kind of figure out things. They don't need to know the equations in advance. They're just trying to figure out things using data or using inquiry. So I usually start a unit with the inquiry activity and then go through about 1 or 2 of these a day. And so let me show you a little more. I'm going to click on this one called the average velocity rule. So ignore that purple bar across the top. I'll show you how to create that in just a second. But this one says a bicyclist initially at rest speeds up steadily. During this time, she averages 5.5 meters per second. So when a student types in answers, they can check their answers at any time, even in the middle of a problem. And if Zoom's not blocking it, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that their percentages start to go up when they get things right. If they get something wrong, and check their answer. By the way, you can hit enter to check answers. Then it'll turn red and they'll have the opportunity to correct it. And when they correct it, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see their completion score goes up. So anytime they get something right, their completion score will go up. But if they get it right, not on the first, they must get it right on the first try for their accuracy score to go up. So, and teachers from your side, you'll be able to see their completion as well as their accuracy. I grade on completion only just to encourage students to get it done, but they like to see that accuracy score go up, so it kind of motivates them anyways. Some teachers use accuracy score or a combination of the two. You can click on these buttons at the top to get to the other problems. And by the way, I should mention that we use a random number generator, so every student's going to get different numbers in their problem. So they can share strategies with each other, but not answers. By the way, you might notice some like crazy looking problems like this one. And I think Mr. Enrique, my bad, might have done this to me, but asked us problems we couldn't actually solve. So we do have some problems that can't be answered. And if your students come across that, so like this one's not a steady motion, so the average velocity rule wouldn't apply. There are a few problems in there where you just click cannot be determined and you'll get credit for it. All right, so that is kind of how students will be doing their homework on there. Happy to answer any questions right now or kind of move on to the next part, which is the next mode that Positive Physics has that's called extra practice. Oh, and I should mention that for this score, every problem is weighted equally, and then every input is weighted equally within the problems. All right, so the next mode is extra practice. So if we looked at this average velocity rule, it had 21 questions. So I use this extra practice. I just let students use it as a way to study. And you'll notice that by default, there are only 4 problems here. So what's going to happen is it's going to randomly grab 4 of those 21 problems and give students a little mini quiz. So right here, if I click on that, I'm going to get 4 random problems from that set to practice on. On this one, if I get something wrong, I won't be able to fix it at first because it's simulating a quiz, but we do have something called corrections mode, where after the student goes through all of the questions, they can hit finalize, and then they can come back and they can start making corrections. And as a teacher, you can see their original score and you can see their correction score as well. All right, the last mode is called the assessment. And the assessment by default is locked, so a student won't be able to get into it unless you unlock it. And I'll show you how to unlock it in a little bit. But it works just like the extra practice, where it gives a quiz. But the difference here, there are a couple differences, is one, it's just going to give one long quiz. So on this one, it would be 6, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16 questions long. So they'll get all those questions at the same time. I'll probably unlock it and show it to you later. And once again, wrong answers will lock, and they'll be able to make corrections after they finish it. And the teacher will be able to see both scores. All right, so that was a super quick summary of what the student experience on Positive Physics is like. If you do have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat right here, and then I will go ahead and show you what things look like from the teacher side and how to do a lot of customization. All right. I know some people might be typing in questions, but I will go ahead and click over to the teacher side. All right, so you'll notice that on the teacher dashboard, you have some extra things over here. So as a teacher, this means I activated section 1, section 2, and section 3. That means I teach 3 different periods. And so the first thing is just how to assign problems to students. So if I want to have the inquiry due tomorrow for my section 1 students, I can click on that right here and click on assign due date, set it to tomorrow. By the way, we have it set up right now. It's in 24-hour clock. It'll automatically adjust to your time zone. So if I wanted to have it due tomorrow night, I could do that and click set due date. and then you'll see that the due date will pop up right here. And this means after 11:30 p.m. tomorrow night, students won't be able to, this section will lock and their scores will be set. They won't be able to access that section anymore after the due date. You can also, by clicking on these, you can lock them just so students, if you don't want students accessing them ahead of time, you can undo that by clicking unlock. You can remove so students won't even see that section, or you can make it extra credit. And the extra credit problems, going back to the student view, the extra credit problems will show up down here and they won't affect the score. But if you have some higher level students that want to try those problems, set them to bonus and the student can try them down here. All right, so the next thing is if you want to remove individual problems, I'm going to show you how to do that. So we have let's say you like the average velocity rule, but there were some questions that you didn't like. So you can go in and you will have a button. You'll have a couple buttons that students don't have. You'll have a restart button that lets you start this over if you want to clear it out and show students something. You also have a show answers buttons, and you have an add or remove problem button. If you click on the add or remove, and Jim, I just saw you ask a question. Let me do this, and then I'll get to it in just a second. If you want to add or remove a problem, you can click on these to remove them. So green means it's still there, gray means it's been removed. So right now I just removed it for all of my section 1 students. If I click on this, that means my section 2 students will still have to do that for their homework, and it could still show up in their extra practice, but it won't show up on their assessment. And if I click close, what a student will see is at the top, they can still see the problem, but it'll say the problem has been removed by your teacher and will not affect your score. All right, Jim said, if I have a completion time for an assessment, but some students have time and a half accommodations, can I individualize the opening time or the due date time? All right, good question, Jim. So the opening is always done manually for right now. And then here's what I would do. If I have students that have accommodations, this is slightly different than last year, but if I have let's say I had 3 students in my first period class that needed accommodations, I would actually open up a new section for them. And I'll show you how to move them over. I put them in like section 4 or something, and then I would customize specifically for them in that different section. And then you could do like time and a half. You could also remove different problems for them. So that's why we call them sections, not necessarily class periods, is if you want to accommodate for students, I would move them over to a separate section and then do the accommodations there. So you actually can customize a bit more than you can last year. Jim, let me know if that makes sense. All right, so continuing on with how to customize. For the extra practice, we saw and Jim, glad that made sense. We saw that student in section 2, some of these have been changed, by the way. That student in section 2, they got 4 problems for their extra practice velocity, for their average velocity rule extra practice. If you want to change that number, you can change it by just clicking on the number and setting it to a different value. So if you want them to only have 2 of those problems for their practice quiz or their exit ticket, you can set that right there. All right, it's very similar for assessment. And I didn't show you this in the student view because it was locked. Assessments default to locked. But when you click on an assessment, you take the whole assessment at once. So when I click here, I think I'm in section 1 right now. I've messed with those numbers. You'll get all those questions in kind of in one place. So the students will go through. There aren't like 10 different assessments. There's just one assessment for each unit. And you can go through and they'll try all of the skills in here. All right. Once again, if you want to individually take out problems, then go back to the work part, go into the skill, and use this add or remove buttons. One other thing I should mention is that if you make any changes to the extra practice or assessment, those will apply for students who haven't started the assessment yet. So if you want to change these numbers, make sure you do change them before any students can get on there and get the old settings. All right, next thing I want to show you is the teacher utilities. And again, feel free to ask questions at any time. So when you signed up, you chose your notation and you chose your gravitational acceleration, but you can set those individually for each section. So if I want my first period students to use the scalar notation, I can do that. Or if I want my AP students to use 9.81 for gravitational acceleration, I can do that as well. Default unit, that's the first one that when they sign in, that's the first one that pops up. So if once you get later into the year, if your AP students are on move to unit 2, change that, and then when they log in, the first thing that they'll see is unit 2. All right. Yeah, so that's the teacher utility. There are a couple other small things on here that you can cut to help you customize as well. All right, so I also want to show you, not going to be as useful this year, but you can print out problems right here. Once again, since every student gets different numbers in their problems, when you print out the problems, they'll have a blank where the students are, where the numbers are, and then so students will write in their own numbers there. Sonia asked a good question. She said, can we make G 9.80? So you can't, but it doesn't really matter because all of the problems have a 1.5% tolerance. So Sonia, if you tell your students to use 9.80 instead of 9.81, they're going to get the same, they're going to get exactly the same things. I mean, when they put in their answers, they're going to get marked right because they're going to be within that 1.5% tolerance. All right, then I want to show you the student scores page. All right, so these are just some dummy students that I added in before. When you first click on student scores, you'll see how they're doing on each skill, and you will see how they're doing on each skill, and you'll see their total score for the unit. You can look at both their accuracy as well as their completion. But you can also get more granular and look at how they're doing on each problem. So if you change all skills to one of the individual skills, so we did the average velocity rule before, and our teacher, or our dummy student right here, they, on the second problem we tried, they got a 67%. They got 2 of them right eventually. And then this is brand new. This actually isn't on the main website just yet, but we just added this feature today. But if you click on their score for that problem, you can see which parts they got right, and you can see what numbers that the student got in the problem. So that's brand new as of today. You actually won't be able to see it until we redeploy the site tonight, and then you'll be able to see it tomorrow. All right, also from this, if you click on assessment, if you want to unlock for an individual student, you can go ahead and click unlock by their name to unlock an assessment for the individual student. Also, when if a student is done or you want a student to be done, you can click on finalize, and this means they'll go into that corrections mode where they can correct their wrong answers. They can do that themselves, or you can say time's up and you can do that for them. All right, so that was a really quick rundown of positive physics from the student perspective as well as the teacher perspective. I'd love to hear any questions that you have. And then also, if you have to duck out, no worries at all. And please do feel free to email me anytime. But I'll definitely hang out here while the Zoom meeting lasts and answer any questions that you have. Oh, I got a really good question right here. Yeah, so I'm not going to try to butcher your first name, but she said, my district just purchased the account, but I'm not sure how to access. So great question. I'm really glad you brought that up because I should go over this. Basically, click on the Teachers Join Free here, whether your district has an assessment or has a subscription or not, and create your account. Once you create your account, there'll be a green bar across the top that's like, you don't have full access yet. Please just shoot me an email and then give me your teacher code, and I'll just manually upgrade that for you. Let me know if that makes sense. So again, whether your school district has paid or not, just create your account here, and if your district has paid, shoot me an email so I can get it upgraded for you. All right. Richard said, Jack, can you talk more about corrections on assessment? How do you recommend we use that with assigning grades? All right, yeah, let me go ahead and unlock our students' assessment here. All right, and go over and refresh. All right, so when our student here has 31 questions on his quiz, that means I made it kind of extra long. Usually they have more like 15 questions. So if they, let's go ahead and say they started right here, and we'll just say that's all they did of their quiz. Usually they would wait until the end, and after the end, after they finished all the questions, they would click on finalize. Then they can start correcting things that were either wrong or that they didn't answer. And as they do that, there's a long one, so it might take a couple answers to see that score go up. As they do that, you'll start seeing their correction score go up. So personally, what I do, some teachers give like a half point back for anything that they correct. I think it's easier to put in your grade book as just 2 separate grades. So I would usually do a 100-point grade for the assessment. And then if they got their corrections to 100%, I would give them another 50 out of 50 grade for that. So I just made it 2 separate grades. You could also just do like you get half a point back for each correction that you make. Richard, let me know if that answered your question. All right, Rob said, could you explain the 3 different levels? Oh yeah, and this isn't unique to the US. So, and I'm glad you brought that up. So let me go back to the teacher. Okay, so as a teacher, and again, don't worry too much about which level you pick at the start. Most people just customize them after that. So section 1, I set it to level 1. And basically what level 1 is, I use this for students who need modifications that maybe have a struggle with getting to grade level. And all it does is it just means that, okay, on that student's dashboard, the complete problems 3, which are the hardest, and the challenge problems, those are extra credit by default. But if you want to take more questions away, you can. And so just the different levels just have which problems are on there by default, but you can always customize them later. I think level 2 is on grade level. For my highest students, I use level 3. And for my students who need modification, I use the level 1 conceptual. But really all the different levels are doing, the problems aren't any different. It's just which of these problems are required by default, but you can always change the default. Rob, I hope that made sense to you. Please do let me know, or feel free to follow up. Agron said, do we create the code for students to log in? Yeah, so when this teacher code right here, this is the code that will allow your students to link their account with yours. So you'll give your students that teacher code, and then when they create their account, they're going to type in a username. Again, tell them to use last name, first initial, or something that will line up with your gradebook, your password, or their password, excuse me, which can be anything they want, the class period that they take you, as well as this teacher code that you created so that we know which student should be linked to your teacher account. Agron, please let me know if that made sense to you. Judith said, I teach a combination of conceptual and traditional physics. Judith, is that in the, oh yeah, I know you teach just 1 class period of physics. Shoot me an email after this. I'll upgrade your account to 2 sections. And then I know it's just 1 class period, but put your conceptual and traditional physics students, put them in different sections. And then you can modify things differently for that. All right, Jackie said, how interactive is the site with Google Classroom as far as assigning work, and how interactive is the site with PowerSchool as far as importing grades? So right now we we're not integrated with any of the other systems out there. That's something we really want to do in the future, but something we definitely want to do. But right now it doesn't integrate. We did, just to make it easy, like you can put the due dates in Positive Physics, and then just when your students log into Positive Physics, it'll be really easy, clear for them what to do. All right, Brett said, where are the finalize buttons for the students? It was right here. Brett, can you see, can you guys see my mouse? Yeah, all right, thanks Enrique. Right down here in the lower left-hand corner, that's where the final button is with the finalize button is. All right. Olga said, can I use it with Schoology? You can use it with whatever you want. We just don't have, it's not like automatically going to integrate with it. Jim said, I haven't seen the video for Unit 1 Embedded Math Extrapolate Problems. Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking that, Jim. So I made that, the extrapolate problems are new this year, but I think they're really good. Let me show you. I did make a video. Eventually, I'll put it together into one. But if you go to embedded math and these last questions, so the code in these, they let it be linear or quadratic. So watch out, it could be kind of anything. If you use this, put this hint right here and click on this. So they're hints for some, but not all problems. It shows you how to use Desmos. It shows students how to use Desmos, which is a really powerful tool. And it shows them how to like input those into a table, and then how to input how to make a best fit line, whether it is a linear, whether it's quadratic, or anything else. All right, Deidre said, should each section have its own code? No, that's why we changed the name to a teacher code this year. You want everyone to use the same teacher code so it all links to your account, but then they'll just select different sections. All right, Mary said, how do you see their work for the questions on quizzes, tests, or homework? So that is what I was showing you. That's brand new. You can't do this yet until tomorrow. But if you go to student scores and you change it from all skills, let me get back to work, change it from all skills to the skill that you're most interested in, you can see how they did on each of those problems. And then if you click on an individual problem, you're like, oh, why did they get that one wrong? You can click on it and you can see exactly the numbers they got in their problem and the answers that they entered. All right. Hepsi said, how do I set the time the assessment closes? I know you, yeah, no problem. You can do that from your dashboard. Go to assessment, click on these. You know it will highlight. So when you want to unlock it, click on this and put assign due date. So once you assign the due date, it'll actually unlock automatically, and then you can just set the time that it closes. The other way, probably the simplest way to do it, is just whenever you want them, just tell them the time to have it done, and click on this and click lock. All right, Hepsi, let me know if that made sense. All right, and Jim, thanks for answering somebody else's question. I'm falling behind. Teacher said, is there a way for students to upload their actual work? There isn't right now, but that's definitely something we want to think about in the future. I had one teacher say she's going to use Google Classroom and just have them upload their work right there. Cool. I think I'm momentarily caught up. Feel free to keep typing the questions away. And again, Zoom will kick us out in about 9 minutes. But if you have questions after this, please do shoot me an email. I always love to hear from teachers. And again, if you got to head out, I won't be offended. No worries. Mary said, someone said to make yourself a student. Yeah, creating a student account for yourself can be helpful. Although as a teacher, you basically have access to all the things that a student does from here. The advantage is you do also have some extra features, including a show answers button. Yeah, we're gonna probably do another one next week. Also, I will shoot an email I'll shoot the link of a recording of this in case you missed the start, or if, yeah, I'll shoot a recording of this, and we'll also do another one next week. There are also, I should show you that on the homepage, there are a couple videos right here. I would definitely watch, as a teacher, I'd watch both of these. It goes over basically everything we went over so far, and I would have your students watch this one. It shows them how to sign up for an account and gives them the details as well. Also, if you have questions, even if you missed the start, I'm more than happy to re-go over anything. All right, Richard said, with my district starting the year 100% online, I need to consider pacing. Different students will move through a unit at different paces. Any recommendation for building in student choice for pacing and due dates? Yeah, good question. So this is the first year we've actually had the ability to set due dates. So I'm not 100% sure exactly how I would handle that. But in general, I do a unit or two each day. There are some teachers that want to lock everything and not let students get ahead. I don't mind if my students get ahead. So I would keep everything unlocked, but I would, so they can get to it ahead of time. Sometimes they like to use the videos and go through those and get ahead, which is, for me, I think is great. But I would think about 1 to 2 sections each day and about a week and a half to get through these units, including the inquiry. Sonia said, what level of students do you use this with? So I taught at a school that had a very wide range of students, anywhere from ACT scores of 12 to 30. And so for my students on the lower end of that spectrum, I thought the level 1 was pretty good for them. And for some students who needed additional modifications, just doing everything before complete problems was appropriate for them. Then the site is designed to, I call it, it's aligned with the fundamentals of AP Physics 1. So if your students are going to take the AP Physics test, I would definitely set them to level 3 and require them to do especially these later problems. Some teachers even take out some of the earlier stuff just so it's less work. And then I would, in addition to this, since this is a lot of numerical and problem solving, I of course would be using those practice AP tests and making sure that they're doing a lot more writing than you're just doing on positive physics. All right. Jim said, I just walked through the unit on extrapolation several times to commit to memory. I noticed the hint button is in gray. Can questions with hints have that button change to blue? Yeah, sure. And I love hearing stuff like that. So email that to me anytime. I'll put that on our list. We have a lot of stuff we're adding right now. Jim, on the questions that don't have hints, there won't even be a button there. So it's not that confusing, but I think putting the button in blue is a good idea. So I love to hear your suggestions. Cool. It looks like a lot of people are signing off. Again, thank you so much for coming to this. I will hang out until Zoom kicks us off and continue to answer questions. But thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And Rob, go to sleep. All right. Mary said, do you also use a book? So I don't. I actually made this because I really didn't like my physics book. And so we just use this, and we do a lot of stuff together and play games in class. But I hadn't found a book that I like. My favorite book is the Conceptual Physics by Paul Hewitt. But that didn't quite have enough of the problem solving that I wanted my students to get, because I really wanted to be able to do labs. And so I don't use, long answer, or short answer is I do not use a book. I just use this. All right, thanks again to everybody. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Mary, I like for my first year's teaching, I would really try to like rush and make sure that I got through each unit, and like we were kind of pressured into giving quizzes every Friday. And then I decided one year to just slow down and make labs the most important thing, and that made my life so much more fun and my students so much happier. So it's a tough year, of course, for physical labs, but yeah, definitely when possible, do it. All right. Can you expand on how to use different levels to differentiate? Can students move up a level fluidly? Yes, great question. I'm really glad you asked that. Yeah, so if this is kind of a good screen to be looking at, hopefully your Zoom stuff isn't in the way like mine. So if a student is in to use different levels, the only thing you need to do is you need to move your student to a different section. So we made some updates this year that allow for a lot more customization and to make this really smooth to change levels. But if you want your student to be in a different level than their classmates, make sure you create a new section for them. But once you do, all of their data will transfer with them. And the nice thing is, if you made this bonus, so this one right here says bonus. Let's say you have a student that does it. If you move them into a section where bonus was required, their work would go with them. All right. Sorry, I'm a little behind on the questions. One says, how do you teach constant velocity, for example? All right, yeah, good question. So what I would do, it's going to look obviously a little bit different this year, but I would go in here and I would pick a couple of these problems and I would go over them with my students for like the first part of, I had Chromebooks in my classroom, and I would go over the couple of the problems with them, go over the concept that a constant speed of 20 meters per second means this car is moving 20 meters every second, get them to figure out, and hopefully they remember this from the inquiry, kind of the formula there, that this one's using scalar, so distance equals average speed times time. And then I do one that kind of gave me a couple different given and work it backwards. And then for kind of the second part of the class, I would tell them to open up their computers and try this one, try to knock out these 5 problems. And then I would have them do the extra practice as kind of like a practice little mini quiz or exit ticket. Let me know if that made sense. Mary says, where do you find the labs? I was told PhET was good. Yeah, so we actually incorporate PhET. We don't get them until, they don't have a simulation that worked really well with us until Unit 4. And then Unit 4 will ask the students to use this PhET simulation to answer those questions. Okay, Tony said, on the different screen with student scores, it appeared that different students had different bonus problems. Were those students in the same section or different sections? Tony, those students were in different sections, but one thing that we did, oh, and by the way, that alarm means that Zoom's gonna kick us out really soon. Yeah, so let me actually just go ahead and thank you guys so much for coming. Those students were in different sections. If I just look at one section at a time, then those were the same. But if you put students from the same period,